Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm really excited to have a friend, colleague, and fellow narcissist relationship buster, or I should say narcissist abuse buster, Lindsey Ellison. She is a relationship coach who specializes in helping people navigate through their divorce or breakup. She's the founder of Start Over Coaching and has a popular blog on how to divorce narcissists and live a happy and healthy post-divorce life. She can be found at lindseyellison.com. That's LINDSEYELLISON.com. But you're going to find out in a second, she's no ordinary coach. This one is funny, got a great, dry, sarcastic sense of humor, smart as a whip, and really knows her stuff about narcissists, codependents, or just people needing advice and direction on how to extricate themselves from something difficult, but to find happiness. So I could not be more happy to have you on the show, on the YouTube, on my YouTube.
Well, thank you. I love it. I'm so, I have always admired your work and have been a huge follower. I think, we were talking about, I think even before we hit record, how long ago we met? I think, what was it, 5 or 6 years ago? I don't even know.
At the time my book came out, and I was just kind of randomly cold calling famous people that I found on the internet, and you, my dear, were one of them. You were so generous in talking to me and interviewing me. Was it did you have like a
I have a podcast.
Podcast, yeah.
Yeah. And so you were kind of, I think, one of my early guests on a podcast. And what I loved about your work, and I'm happy to dive in and just give a background of kind of how I came about doing this work. I was married and divorced at how old was I? 35. I had 2 small kids during the time, and the divorce was pretty, really painful. And I really had to kind of exit and kind of plan an escape route, if you will. Mm-hmm. And the entire relationship was so confusing to me. I was in therapy for a long time. I had a great therapist, but there was really no mention of narcissism or him being a narcissist at all, really. There was narcissistic tendencies, but not him being an actual narcissist. So it really wasn't until I exited the marriage, and then I ended up dating and fell right into the arms of another one as the path continues until you start healing on your own codependency. And that's when another therapist was telling me what a narcissist he was. And I was like, what does that really mean? And so, I've heard of it. So, and this was several years ago at this point, but I remember going into Barnes & Noble right after that session and finding a book that really kind of blew my mind so much that I fell to the floor. And it was like, it had written everything about my relationship and all of this other stuff. So that was kind of the early quest of finding out more about this whole narcissism codependency thing. And it was the beginning of me truly understanding not only about that current relationship that I was experiencing extreme heartbreak, but it really helped me map out my marriage. Right. And then it helped me map out, my childhood. Oh my gosh. My father, God, I hope he doesn't see this, but it's like my father is a bit of a narcissist, and all of the patterns that I kept repeating the same pattern over and over again. And
can I stop you just for 1 second?
Yeah.
My father was a narcissist, and he's gone, so I don't have to worry about him watching it. But if your father's a narcissist, he probably won't be interested in watching something that you're doing on the internet. That was my experience.
Pretty true. Every time I've written a blog or anything, any accomplishment, he's just happy I've had the accomplishment. He really doesn't have time to actually read it. And he always asks me about how's your book coming? How's your book coming? And I think all he really wants is me to be as you always say, narcissists see their children as an extension of themselves. Right. So I think he just wants me to be an author so he can have a daughter who's an author. But
I got to tell you a quick, put a little pause there on what you were saying. I got to tell you a quick story. My dad, God rest his soul, super narcissist, didn't really care about anything I did unless somehow it made him feel better. Well, in my first book and the second, I quoted him and saying, you know, everything starts off as what starts off as a soulmate dream ends up as a cellmate nightmare. And I said, you know, Dad, I included you in my book. And that is when he became interested in my book. That's when he wanted to read it. So as soon as my book was published, I brought it over to show my dad, because like most people who are raised by narcissists, they're still trying to get their affirmation. And the first thing he did was he says, what page is my quote? And then he underlined it and he put a bookmark on. And everyone he showed his son's book to, he made sure he showed him that quote. So there you go.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar to me, of course.
But you were saying, sorry.
But anyway, yeah, so I had found a lot of information on codependency, but not a lot of information about narcissism and really that kind of clinical understanding of it. Right. And that is when when we met, I came across your book and I remember reading it and it just blew me away. And it answered, and the way you wrote it, it was so articulate and explained so much. And I have underlined the very first copy I have. It's like in my bookshelf behind me. I have underlined it 100 different times of just, it helped give me insight about me, about my father, about my mother, about my husband, about my kids and their relationship. So it answered so much. So, and that was several years ago. So really, I have a course, an online course that anyone could take called Break Free from Your Narcissist. And that is a prerequisite. Your book is a prerequisite to the work. And oftentimes if I meet with a client, I'll say, okay, great. I'm excited to work with you. But let's meet in like 2 weeks so you could read his book, because let's just save time, because you say it, so I really think that, I probably have dozens and dozens of clients who've read your work. And so I always say that you're a pioneer. I think you're a pioneer in what you've done, because there's been so limited discussion about it. And I'm sure you've heard this. You might have even said this in your book, but so often I have clients who come to me and their therapist has never really mentioned their husband or partner being a narcissist at all, like mine, and so it's like we're almost in like the kind of infancy stages of truly still understanding the impact of this disorder and how, abusive and devastating it could be.
But you bring up a really important point, is that most therapists do not have an in-depth understanding of what I call a pathological narcissist is. And that, in my book, is someone with narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and someone with an out-of-control addiction. Moreover, when you don't know what something is, and I think I have a video out there that says if you don't know what it is, you can't see it. But it's really that simple. If you don't have a conception of what a narcissist is, then one will be in your office, and you will miss the dysfunctional, sometimes diabolical dynamics that are at play, whether it's a marriage therapy or individual therapy. But worse than that is, until I wrote my book, people didn't really know what codependents were, because it was just this mixture of words and concepts. And so I feel blessed, and thank you, Mom, who I call my codependent angel. I know she helps me out a lot. But it's like I got a chance to not only redefine codependence, or what I now call people with self-love deficit disorder, and I redefined pathological narcissist, but I came up with an explanation that finally gives clarity to whether you're a therapist or the person suffering from narcissistic abuse. Because you and I both do the same things. We are trying to help people. We're not just trying to write things and create new ideas. So when you tell me that you use my material to help your folks, and I know how good you are, and folks, trust me, Lindsey is the real deal. There are,
oh, thank you.
No, there are a lot of coaches out there. Lindsey,
yeah, there are.
Lindsey's the cream of the crop. And how do I know this? Well, this is between you and I. Don't tell anyone. Okay, I trust you guys will keep this confidential.
On YouTube.
I was telling her my problems, and she gave me some kick-ass advice and really made me think of things that I never would have thought of. That really, I just told her before we got together, I said, you know what you told me about this, that, and the other? I did it, and I had a smile. So without further ado, I'm so glad that we finally got to do this, and it's the least I can do for inviting me on your podcast years ago. But Lindsey and I, when we were talking about what we wanted this video to be, we decided to take a different angle, or at least it's a different, actually for me it's a different angle. I don't think it's so much for Lindsey, but it's to talk about what to do in order to stay healthy. Or, and I have to look at our headline that we agreed on, is healthy dating with healthy boundaries. So Lindsey, do you want to start the conversation off? And
yeah. So oftentimes I am, I'll coach people through, they're either kind of really in the woes of divorcing the narcissist and through the legal battle. They'll either stay with me, or people will find me after they've just kind of gone through this divorce and they feel, quite depleted and financially and emotionally, but, they want to start their lives over and they would like to meet someone and like to meet a companion. So kind of the number one question I always get is, how do I know I'm not going to fall into the arms of another narcissist? How do I repel them? What are the signs? What are the initials? Can I know it on the first date? And then how do I avoid meeting them altogether? And someone who has truly been, with a narcissist, it's a huge fear.
Oh.
So
I've had that fear, and truth be told, I just recently got a divorce. And I don't really want to talk that much about it on this YouTube video, and I will later, but I am open about it. But it's a very tough dynamic to break that habit that is seemingly ingrained. And once you are out of a relationship, like I am, it's like if you just were in a really bad car accident, you don't want to get back in the car. You ever meet someone like that where they're like, so go ahead. So you were saying, Lindsey.
No, it's you just don't want to be injured again.
Right.
And so I have, some kind of advice that I could give, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you think. But I think that the number one thing to prevent yourself from, you're going to meet narcissists all the time. It's falling for them. It's engaging with them and taking that to the next step where you actually really like them, or you end up, having sex with one of them, and then they really kind of catch you in. Right. So one of the things is that when you are, I believe that if you're newly divorced or newly broken up with someone, you are at a huge risk for narcissists. Narcissists love broken people. They don't like healthy people. So the number one way to repel a narcissist is to be healthy and to have self-love. And self-love is the narrative for boundaries. And I always say boundaries are like kryptonite to narcissists.
So I want to repeat that because I love it. Self-love is the narrative to boundaries, and boundaries are the kryptonite to withstand or to repel pathological narcissists.
Yeah.
I took a little poetic
poetic license.
License, yeah. Absolutely. You actually took the words out of my mouth. And it was funny because as you were talking, and setting this up, and we're talking about, so what do you need to do to avoid narcissists? I'm going to go, okay, Lindsey, please don't start giving them pointers yet, because what I'm going to say is going to supersede what you're going to say. And once again, you didn't disappoint me. You are absolutely right that the only way to solve the dysfunctional end of the human magnet syndrome, which is the instinctual, the reflexive attraction to someone who's gorgeous, handsome, exciting, sexy, charming, funny. I mean, because people don't fall in love with narcissists. SLDs or codependents don't fall in love with narcissists. They fall in love with people that really, really take that really get them going. Is you have to find out why you repeat this attraction pattern, because you are doing something that you've always done your whole life, going all the way back to your childhood. Mm-hmm. You are feeling comfortable with a familiar person. It is a love template. It is a relationship template that you learned early on. If you've been driving on the right side of the road your whole life, and I know this because I moved to Japan when I was in the Army for 2 years, it's scary as hell to drive on the left side of the road. Well, if you've dated narcissists your whole life and you don't love yourself because of everything that has happened to you, you're going to keep driving on that narcissistic side of the road. You got to heal the wounds that created that relationship template. What do you think? What do you think?
Absolutely. And I, have a multitude of expressions, but I always say that you likely attract, the romantic partner that you likely attract resembles the wounded parent, the parent that wounded you the most, right? And so that parent, and this is where I learned this from you, is that when you are used to being loved only on certain conditions, right, and not unconditionally, you automatically go into a romantic partnership, even work and friendships, but we're talking about romance in this case, but you start with having the bar set quite low. Right. And narcissists love it when your bar is set low. And to set it high means that you truly love who you are.
When going back to kryptonite, I love that. I think it's Superman and kryptonite. Mm-hmm. Narcissists can smell the SLD or the codependent. SLD is self-love deficient. That's the word I use for codependent. The narcissist can sense the SLD. They don't know what to do with anyone other than someone with self-love deficiency, as the SLD doesn't know what to do with anyone who's not a narcissist. That's the dance. That's human magnet syndrome. But because narcissists are seeking someone to fulfill their life, and codependents or SLDs are seeking someone to fulfill their life, and they're both broken people who are depleted, that emptiness, that loneliness, that shared shame, which they don't think about, energizes the attraction process. And so if you're going to stop this whole dating thing, you have to know, if you're going to stop this whole dating pathological narcissists or falling in love with pathological narcissists or marrying them, you got to reverse this human magnet syndrome attraction to narcissists, which means you have to become familiar with a new part of yourself. Mm-hmm. Not the self-love deficient, the injured, the traumatized one, but the self-love abundant one who knows about self-esteem, who knows about boundaries, who believes they deserve in something good. And I know for a fact you do that type of work in your coaching practice.
Yeah, I do. And that's, I think that's the fun part about it's, people always ask me, and you know what, I heard the same thing of, well, you have to love yourself first. Oh, yeah. Like, what the hell does that mean? What is that? Yeah, I love myself. Yeah, I take care of myself. I eat well, blah, blah, blah. What does that mean? And what is that first step to having that, you're not going to love yourself overnight, right, but what are those baby steps that you have to take? And so that's where I help you with that. And, when it comes to dating, which is what we're talking about, one of those first things that I actually have my clients do is to and you're going to be dating soon. So I would say the same thing to you, is really have clarity on what it is that you require.
Right.
What do you require? What do you want? And so I have a checklist of the things that you want, things that you're willing to compromise on, but what are your deal breakers?
Right.
And to be really clear on them, because if you have physical chemistry with someone, which, doesn't happen with everybody.
But chemistry by itself is the human magnet syndrome. I'll talk about it. Go ahead.
Yeah. But that's the thing. And of course, I always say to people, really, really take your time with someone. A true narcissist will want to go 0 to 80 in a week. And when they start asking you out on vacation to go someplace together with you, and like they start to envision your future and they wine and dine, I mean, just this whole red carpet treatment is what I say, rather than just taking time to get to know each other and figure each other's boundaries out and what each other require. But that is kind of the first step for me.
Isn't that what they call love bombing? I hear that word a lot. Out there and on some of my social networking communities. The narcissist love bombing is where they're just here is a person that you don't know is going to be selfish, self-centered, entitled, grandiose, egotistic, egocentric, blah, et cetera, but in the beginning they are generous, sweet, kind, seemingly empathetic, and they love bomb you. Yeah.
Okay, great example. Great. I'm glad you mentioned that word, because, the person who I broke up with, the true pathological narcissist post-divorce, our first date was like intoxicating. It was over the top.
Right.
Second date, I remember him going, you are amazing. Like you're everything that I've been looking for. It's almost as like we complete each other. Do you like, such and such city? I really think we should go there together. And being that I am really, really wounded deep down from my divorce, and so to have some guy swoop me up and basically like lick my wounds, because that's what because I did not do that for myself. That's their elixir, and I became addicted to that elixir. And so when they stop, after the whole fantasy for them is kind of getting old and bored, and they start to slowly discard you, which means they're not texting you as often. They're still keeping you on their hook, but they're not texting you as often. You literally go into withdrawal. Like, where is he? Why isn't he talking to me? What's going on? And I became obsessed. And then the minute, it's almost as they have radar. The minute I would say, you know what, screw him. Think, oh, I'm so sorry. I've been in meetings. I really want to be with you, and let's go away this weekend. And you're like, oh, and so it's just like, heroin to the addict, and it's up and down, and you never feel safe.
So I want to kind of round out your whole addictions idea with my work on SLDD addiction. And I know my viewers have heard it often, but I'll kind of say briefly. As you're talking about this, Lindsey, self-love deficit disorder, or the codependent, has an addiction. And to solve this problem, to solve the attraction to narcissists, the inevitable next relationship with a pathological narcissist, they have to work on all of the psychological layers that are responsible for the SLDD. And one of them is the addiction. Every SLD I know will tell you, including how it was for me, that in between relationships, you experience extreme pathological loneliness. It's its own aching feel of worthlessness, shame, an existential void. The SLDD addiction requires, the SLDD addiction is the drug to take that pain away. So if loneliness is is the pain that the SLD brings to the relationship. The drug is the narcissist, because to solve loneliness, you have to be with someone. The problem is, because of the human magnet syndrome, the SLD is always going to fall in love with the narcissist. So the drug of choice is the narcissist. And I love what you said about withdrawals. If you should leave the narcissist, you experience excruciating withdrawals. This pathological loneliness is beyond describable unless you're an SLD. But what makes it even more insidious is the reason the SLDs often stay with the narcissist is because they know that the loneliness, it's like when I smoked cigarettes, I knew if I'd stop, I would go crazy with withdrawals. Mm-hmm. And they need that fix. So that drug not only keeps them taking something that makes them feel good, that never really works, but they take it just because they're afraid of how much pain there'll be, and if they don't. So I'm glad that in your practice, you also embrace this addiction idea.
Yes, and and if I ever see a true addiction, I actually refer them to other specialists who are really specialized for that. But as if you don't feel as if you are fully healed from the pain, I always use the metaphor of you leave one relationship and you feel as though you're you've jumped ship and now you're in the ocean all by yourself. And if you truly know and feel aligned with who you are and what you need to do and what you want in your life, you can swim to shore quite easily. But if you can't, you'll see a life raft, and that life raft is the narcissist, because the narcissist loves to be that life raft because it gives him narcissistic supply to make him seem the hero, the fantasy that he's always wanted to achieve, that he was never able to achieve in his childhood. So oftentimes I say to people, when you are, if you feel as though you are in an open sea and you're not in that kind of painful loneliness and you're all by yourself, do not date until you work on that.
Exactly.
But if you are in this really good place and you feel really good, so the next question people ask me is, all right, well, what do I do if I'm on that first date?
Actually, can I jump in here? I just want I love the way that you're taking the lead on this video. I love what you're saying, because people have heard me say the same things over and over again. So this is wonderful content. But I want to add something before you continue. So put a little pause there.
Yeah.
What you described, I use this concept called relationship math. And it's another
relationship what?
Relationship math.
Math.
There'll be a little graphic right there. I'm going to hope that my finger is pointing in a direction I can actually put the graphic on. But I look at it as it actually is another explanation for the human magnet syndrome. Is a narcissist is a depleted, lonely, shame-based person, what I call a half person. An SLD or a codependent is a depleted, lonely, shame-based person, a half person. They're very different in how that manifests. Each need the other to escape their loneliness and shame. Throw in the addiction part. So the half person and the half person become one, and they finally feel happy. They need each other to escape their unconscious feelings of shame, their conscious feelings of loneliness. So the half and the half equals one, and one is a half relationship. Now, the relationship math for healthy people is a healthy person, which is a person who has problems but keeps getting better and takes care of themselves and all this other good stuff. They are independent of a relationship. They love themselves, and they don't need the relationship to make them love themselves. They come to the relationship with self-love. They are not depleted. That one person who is full, one is going to attract another one, because the human magnet syndrome also says healthy people are attracted to healthy people. 1 + 1 = 2, and 2 interdependent, self-loving people is a healthy relationship. So half and half equals 1, and 1 is a half relationship, when 1 plus 1 equals 2, and 2 is a full relationship. Or in other words, healthy people don't need each other to feel good about themselves. They enjoy how the other person makes them feel better, and they get to enjoy life. They're not escaping it. So I just find
okay, that's so funny, because I have a similar thing where I call it the misinformed algorithm. But it's a different math component, but we're saying the same thing. So I always say the misinformed algorithm, where, it stems from the Jerry Maguire movie, You Complete Me. I think that is, a wrong message. So I always say, in an unhealthy relationship, the assumed algorithm is 1 plus 1 equals 2. Right. But in a healthy relationship, I say 1 plus 1 actually equals 2 ones. Yeah. That's what I always say.
I love it.
So it's similar, but it's 2 ones, because you are individual people and you don't complete each other.
And that's the word I use. I got from graduate school. Differentiation of self is to be connected to a relationship and have your own identity, versus enmeshment and needing the other person or the family to feel good about themselves. So I don't know about you, but I suck at math, but I was really good at coming up with a
I do too.
So do you remember where I kind of jumped in and threw the relationship math in?
Yeah.
Okay,
and so I was saying, so if you were to go on that first date,
right,
and then the whole, let's say you've got the basic things. Oh, this person's attractive. They're, on that first date in 10 minutes whether this is, you want to get out, or this maybe has potential. So you have that part. So you get passed through that. But then I always say, and this is another metaphor that I use, when in dating, there should be various steps. So I like to say, if this date is pulling up to your house, there's various steps to get into your actual home. And I use that as your heart, okay? Mm-hmm. Gets out of the car, walks on the sidewalk, gets up on the stoop, knocks on the door, and then you talk to them, and then you allow them in. So there's various steps. And if you are truly having not worked on this codependency or SLDD, you will automatically, from the road, say, yeah, come in.
Right.
Really quickly. Right. And so I think this is where I come in as a coach, and I teach you those various steps without looking like a bitch, right, without looking psycho, without, just how do you have those conversations where if someone says to you, may I come over tonight? Or, and you're hitting it off, but those are those boundaries that are really hard to articulate if you've never had to do it before.
And as a psychotherapist, I'm going to presume that the clients that you have, if they have good self-love, or through your work with them, they increase their self-love, the application of your rules makes sense. Because it's my experience that as brilliant as your work or anyone's work is, any set of rules won't take, that they won't hold up. If underneath, secretly, unconsciously, you hate yourself, you love yourself, you carry that shame that I'm only as good as making someone happy. I'm someone else's good thing, not mine. And what I do is I understand that the cause of SLDD is early childhood attachment trauma, the core shame, the loneliness, the addiction. And once I can sort out the trauma and heal the trauma and the core shame, that's when your work and my more kind of educational work really can skyrocket.
Mm-hmm.
It sticks. It's like teaching someone math. It's like you teaching me algebra. I can't learn it because I don't have the ability to absorb it. What do you think of what I just said? I know you're not a clinical psychotherapist, but you do brilliant work on the coaching level. And there's not always there's not always a clear delineation between what you do and what I do. So what are your thoughts about my approach to it?
Absolutely. And this is why I have so many people read your book, because I'm not about to sit here and profess kind of a clinical explanation, because I don't have that background. But I think it is so important to know it in order for you to truly heal. And I love to take a clinical approach, such as your book and the work that you do. And then my work is about, self-esteem, self-love. A lot of the work that I do actually can be quite spiritual in terms of just knowing what your spirit is. And I help people, depending on their faith, whatever it is. If you, I always ask my clients, what is your higher power? What is your faith? And we work around their existing belief system. But it's tapping into the knowledge from a logical level, and then also tapping into your own spirit and your truth. And what narcissists do, if you've been with one for a long, long time, and I hate to say this because I have to be very careful on my wording, but what people say is, he robbed me or she robbed me of my truth. And I always like to rephrase that and say, no, you gave it to them. Because it's so disempowering by saying that.
I have to say, that is why there's no coincidence why you and I get along, and why I have so much appreciation for your work, because there is a cadre, a huge collection of coaches out there, many of whom make a living by their YouTube work. And it's all about, you're the victim, you were hurt, protect yourself, fight back, don't do this. And it's all about the bad guy hurting you. But it's true, the narcissists hurt SLDs, codependents. It's absolutely true. And there's no excuse for it. But the SLD is always going back to the next partner. It's the same person with a different face. It's the same dance hall where they find the same dance partner. They are participating. And until you take responsibility, even for the human magnet syndrome, even if your fault, and I quote that because even if your fault is unconscious, and because codependents don't say, I want to get hurt again. Oh, there is a narcissist. He's going to totally screw me over. I hope he asks me out. No, they see the best in that person. You got to recognize your part of this equation. So thank you for illustrating that.
Yeah, and it is, and again, this is where kind of probably that spiritual component, I don't know if it's even spiritual, but it's just a mindset. And after my divorce and the horrible breakup, I felt robbed. I felt emotionally victimized and raped. That's how I kept saying it. And he left me with nothing. And it just kept repeating. And then, you could even probably comment on this. I started to become addicted to my own pain. It felt good to be in pain. I didn't know how to get out of it.
I want to comment about that, but when you're finished, do you want me to say something now? Or?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're addicted to your own pain, actually just say a little bit more about that.
Okay.
What about your pain that you stay connected to? Because is it the pain itself, the experience, or is it something? Tell me more about that.
Sure. I think it was you get into this pattern of sabotage and negative narrative of, he did this to me. This was done to me. I am not enough. I don't feel like I'm enough. And so you can just get onto this. I think you can become addicted to this because here's how I like to say it. It is so much easier to blame than it is to take accountability for yourself. So we know how to blame, we know how to get mad, but then really I find that the true shift and the true healing happens when you take away their power by owning yours and how you co-created this really shitty relationship. Right. And that I find when you really own it, it doesn't take, it gives you back your power, if you will.
Absolutely. So this addiction to pain thing, and I'm glad you clarified it. So my take on this is the SLD spent his or her formative years with pain and suffering. And it was those morsels of the narcissist giving them attention, giving them because as I talk about in my book, the developmental pathway that leads to adult codependency or adult self-love deficit disorder is you're raised by a narcissist and you figure out a way to make them happy. And you are the child who gets conditional love. And you learn that conditional love is as best as you get. And from that childhood experience, the attachment trauma, a relationship template is formed, and that informs the human magnet syndrome about relationships. So when your experience of love is pain, it's not that, and I heard you say that, it's not that you want the pain. It's familiar. You know about it. You can close your eyes and walk in the dark and find what you need. The pain fuels the desire to get the narcissist lover back. It is part of the cycle that plays itself out. Loneliness and shame, narcissist happiness, loneliness, it's all that they know. And if you have been doing, and going back to the driving on the right lane of the road and the left side of the road analogy, if that's all you know, that pain, you can get lost in it. And another way of looking at it is a concept that I call false power syndrome. Is that, and this is most common for what I call active codependents or active SLDs, is you get so angry and hurt by the person that injured you, psychologically injured you, and in some cases, sadly, physically, that you feel enraged and angry, and that makes you feel paradoxically strong and in control. That person hurt me. I can't believe he did that. And you stew on it, and you feel in a strange way kind of alive and powerful because you're going to do something to make it better. And of course, that's what leads you back to the narcissist, or as I would say in my observe, don't absorb work, leaves you back to the pig's wrestling ring. And next thing you know, you're wrestling with a pig who, as George Bernard Shaw said, never wrestle with a pig. You'll get dirty, and beside the pig likes to wrestle. So that, long story short, the addiction to the pain is the knowledge and the comfort of what's familiar. So I think
I'm curious, how do you, first of all, I have another monitor for your viewers. I still take notes when you talk because I always learn something. So I was taking notes. But
by the way, you can replay the video.
I could, but then I always like to have, then I'd have to go find it. And where was that? So I just like to take notes.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question to you is, and I have my own, let's say, protocol of how to work on that. But what is your advice on changing that, like getting power from within and changing that false power system or the false power patterns that you have?
Okay. So false power syndrome is a form, it's just, as I write in the human magnet syndrome, there are many different symptoms that are part of self-love deficit disorder. And the more that you know about the symptoms, the more you can understand this is not healthy. This is a part of the problem. So the way that you address the false power syndrome is to understand, and that's where that's where I roll out the George Bernard Shaw saying, don't wrestle with pigs, you'll get dirty and the pig loves it. And I introduce the idea that the narcissists always win because they are the master of their psychological wrestling ring. And all of their power is to get you in the wrestling ring and to keep you in it. And if they can get you to want to fight them, if they can piss you off, or if because of your core shame and your pathological loneliness and your addiction, as we talk, you want to go back into the wrestling ring, because addictions are unconscious. When I wanted to smoke after, my mom was dying from cancer, that pull was unconscious. It defied logic. So the powers are intense to get you into the wrestling ring. And whether it's, what I call the codependent SLD delusion, false power syndrome, and all these other things I describe in my book, the resolution to that is find a way to understand what happened to you as a child, is to understand that the core of everything that drives you into the arms of the same narcissist, or as the same person but with a different face, is that core experience of a trauma with your parent, the narcissist, and parent with the codependent, the shame that you endured and brought to your adulthood, the loneliness that came from it, and the addiction that takes the pain away. So however you do it, whether it's with a coach such as yourself, a psychotherapist, is get to what happened to you when you were younger, talk about it, work it out, put words into it, get to the feelings, heal something that's stuck inside of you. When you heal those wounds, you can get to self-love. And then my advice, or your advice, sticks. So that's the short version of the answer. Sometimes I kind of swerve away from the question, and I don't. Did I answer the original question?
Yeah. It was, what is your advice for getting out of that false power syndrome, and so, my advice to that is a couple things of how do you get out of a bad habit,
right.
And a couple things that I do is I talk about, I like to have my client come up with an actual picture in their mind of this wounded child. At what age, generally. Sometimes I'll have them actually get a photo of this child, put it on their computer, put it in their I had one client that put her photo of herself on her dashboard of her car. She did so much driving, and really start talking to this child of, like, you didn't know any better. I've got your back. One of the things I always say is that until that inner child is wounded, they are driving your car, and you're the one who's backseat driving, trying to tell them where to go. And that's why you're in the ditch all the time, because a child cannot physically drive your body of a car. So the only way, I think, to get out of that kind of addictive, negative mindset is repetition and daily practice of saying loving things to yourself, even if you don't believe it in the beginning. And I always use the example of, if you have to go, we've all had probably weight loss journey in our life at some point, but if you have to lose 10 pounds, let's say, or 20, 30 pounds, and you make this conscious decision, I'm no longer going to look like this because I have to fit into those jeans. What do? You make a plan. Right. And it's daily practice. You actually have to plan what you're going to eat. You're monitoring what you're going to eat. You go to the gym. You go see a personal trainer. And all of those things for those first 2 weeks, you hardly even see any results, but it's repetition. It's repetition, repetition. And then you're also mindful every day by calorie counting and changing food habits and buying broccoli instead of bread or whatever the thing is. And then over time, it actually just becomes habitual. So what I say to people,
just what you are talking about is research driven. It has been proven in medical research. You're talking about creating new neural pathways.
Yes.
Because there's the brain, there's plasticity in the brain, and repetition, habit formation changes the structures of the brain. So this is just not your opinion, which, by the way, is 100% correct. It is also proven among the research professionals.
That's what I love talking to you, because I have these lovely statements and then you back it up with a clinical actual proof. So that's great. But for me, when I was trying to get out of that kind of false power narrative in my head, I actually started thinking of this person and thanking him every day.
Right.
Even though I didn't mean it. You know, I'm like, and I was so happy that I learned this lesson, and I was just so grateful. Oh, thank God I didn't marry him, or thank God I didn't have kids with him, or there's always something to be grateful about. So we can just pick whatever it is. And then if I saw anything, like I used to remember, like I would see his car. It wasn't his car, but the kind of car. And I used to like just have a lot of expletives that would come out of my mouth because I was reminded of him. And then what shifted for me was, I am so glad for him. Thank you so much. And so that's kind of an example of just how to like do this repetitive, different alternative way of thinking to get you out of that. And
Lindsey, do you remember when we were planning this whole discussion out and we were saying 15 or 20 minutes? And I said,
I know.
I have a feeling this is going to be a long one.
We could talk for hours.
Hours.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is we could talk for hours because there's a wonderful synergy in your work and my work.
Yeah.
And plus, I just think you're really sweet.
Oh, thanks.
You're actually a lot of fun to talk to. And you gave...
Well, thank you.
And again, as I said before, great advice you gave me. It's working.
Oh, good.
and
no one knows what that is, but it doesn't matter.
Real secret. But seriously, guys, gals, women, viewers, take a look at Lindsey. Is it, what's your,
Lindsey Ellison, lindseyellison.com.
Okay, here's your plug time. Plug away, my dear. Talk about.
Yeah, I actually have a podcast, which is pretty popular. I haven't added anything to it in a while, but it's still a lot of episodes. If you go onto iTunes or any podcast application, it's Start Over, Find Happiness. That's the brand, or you could just even look for my name. I interview a lot of authors and people like Ross and a lot of different experts, and we have some really, and I've brought some clients in and we've had some really fun conversations. I haven't done a YouTube channel, unfortunately, like you have, Ross. I should, but I'm in the process of working on a book, so I'm not taking on any kind of new projects at the moment. But I also have a really great online course called Break Free from Your Narcissist.com. And it's a 7-module course, and a lot of the principles that Ross is talking about and I'm talking about is kind of all in there. And it takes you from thinking about whether you should be leaving this person and how to know whether you should leave this person, all the way to if you're going through a divorce, what questions to ask a lawyer, how to handle all of that. And then I even have stuff about dating and co-parenting with a narcissist. That's another thing we should probably talk about, you and I. Yeah.
By the way, I highly recommend her course because, I know this, when I recommend a therapist, a doctor, or for that matter, anything, is a person is only as good as who they are. There's so many people that are smart. There's so many people that are educated. There's so many people that can dazzle you with what they know about narcissists and codependents or SLDs. But when you have when you have a heart and passion and you can connect to someone and they know you're connecting to them and they can feel that, you're the real thing. Your folks feel that energy, that healing energy, that teaching energy, and you just got great stuff to teach. So I highly recommend you guys to check Lindsey out. Of course, buy my book. And here's my little.
It is. I mean, I think I even say in my course, like, okay, before we even get started, read Ross's book, and Yeah. And I read your first version, and now even in the book that I'm writing, I've quoted you and because there's no point in me even trying to say it, because you've always said it best in that way. You have a way of just, you have that clinical background that I don't have. And I really believe that the path to healing is having a true clinical understanding of your childhood and all the wounds, what brought you to your adult life, and any type of sabotage or destruction that you're currently going through. You have to have that basic knowledge. And that's why I always have it as a real prerequisite to the work that you do with me. And then from there, you can apply different types of concepts. So that's probably why we have such synergy, because we're talking the same thing, but it's really, we both are part of the kind of the solution, I think.
Absolutely. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my Self-Love Recovery Institute website and organization, where you can get the full-length seminar videos that are from 6 hours to 3 hours, that are made for both professionals and general public, as well as other services and events like our intensive weekend retreat that is life-changing. So Lindsey, you rock. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise.
And let's do it again.
Would love to.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.